So, have you ever thought about what it takes to host a game in the cloud? Well, this series is for you. On the first Wednesday of every month, we talk about exactly that, how cloud is influencing and empowering the gaming world. So, in this session, we'll be talking about Halo, matchmaking, and how cloud gaming is becoming more of a service than thinking about individual servers. Tune in to find out more. Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Cloud with Chris. You're with me, Chris Reddington, and here we talk about all things cloud. Now, as you saw from the intro there, once again, we're talking about cloud gaming notes. So we're the second episode in this series, so hopefully you're enjoying it. If you do, please like, please subscribe, hit the notification bell. This is a monthly series, so we'll be releasing new content first Wednesday of every month, so we'll be carrying on that theme there. And I'm delighted once again to say that we have a guest joining us once again. And you are familiar with this guest. He needs no introduction because we had him on the show last time. Very pleased to welcome back Lee Williams. Lee, thank you for joining again.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All good, all good. So last time we talked Minecraft. Last time we talked, I guess, servers and thinking about overall, I guess, this journey and this transition that gaming has been on. And we're going to carry on that discussion today, talk a little bit about Halo. You know, we talked about it in the introduction there, and I think it's really one of the great examples, I think, from Microsoft about how gaming has become a service, isn't it? Let's maybe start there.
Yeah, I think kind of, when you kind of look at what Halo is, like you say, it is a service, game service in general, not just looking at Halo as a trend that is becoming more and more popular. But Halo specifically, I mean, kind of the multiplayer aspect of what Halo represents, the multiple iterations of what the Halo franchise is, Halo Wars and so forth. It has really become an interactive experience that requires multiple inputs from other players to really bring out what that game is. And I think no matter how good computer AI and machine learning can be, you can't really compete with the game quality when you're playing against another real person having to make decisions. And yeah, Halo, like many other games in that genre, but Halo is a great example of that.
Sure. And I'm going to pull up a web browser here just for a second. This blog post here, for anyone who's listening in rather than watching in, we're reading a blog post back from October 2016. So this was, I think it was around the time that Halo 5 launched. It may have been just before, I can't quite remember. But this is talking about effectively how they built the underlying engine, the underlying framework that hosts Halo 5 and some of the other Halo games, talking about something called the Actors Framework. So for anyone who has done any kind of service fabric development, or maybe done some computer science theory previously, you might have heard of this thing called the Actor Framework. It's been theoretical for quite some time, and it was actually this game, Halo, as if you read through this blog post, they talk about how they took that technology, built upon it, and actually integrated that into Service Fabric, and it became one of the offerings as part of Service Fabric. And I think going back to what we're talking about here, Lee, that's really interesting, right? Because it just shows how gaming is, once again, one of these engines that kind of propels everything forward and just drives some of that innovation in the cloud as well, I think.
Yeah, completely. And I think this is a point I think we mentioned last time, which is expectations of gamers in terms of the quality of the experiences they come to expect grows incredibly quickly because it is a very competitive industry. It's not just kind of some of the big players that typically come to mind. It's multiple players, mobile games and multiple platforms. And that competition, if that's the right way of saying it, drives that innovation that's required. And subsequently, the innovations in the services that provide that, like you said, have greater applications beyond just gaming.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think maybe let's go ahead. This series is called Cloud Gaming Notes, right? And I think it would be unfair for us not to do a little bit of gaming while we're here as well, and have a little bit of a discussion. So
I do have to find out, Chris, not to jump in. This is your dashboard Crash Bandicoot Rocket League. Yeah, I looks very similar to mine.
Well, that's good. There we go. We're a good pair. We'll have to do some. We'll have to play together sometime, especially Crash Team Racing. So I'm going to let out a little bit of my childhood here, but that was one of my all-time favorite games as a kid. Love that. And I'm slowly, playing it again at the minute while I can, just getting some of the races done and trying to unlock new characters and things. So it's a lot of nostalgia, but yeah, enjoying that one. So for anyone, I guess, listening in, it might be a little difficult in terms of figuring out what we're playing, what we're doing, but I guess you're here mainly for the discussion. The kind of gaming side of it is just going to add on top of that as well. But what I've done is I'm just on the Xbox dashboard at the moment, and all I've done is I've made sure my games and stuff are up to date. I haven't turned the game on. Well, I did quickly to test earlier. Hopefully it didn't sync up, but we'll talk through a few different pieces along the way and how cloud is kind of enabling some of this experience. So we'll see how we go. It might all go crashing and burning in terms of the demo gods, these things live, but we'll see. So let's jump into Halo. So I think hopefully it does it now that I've said it, and I know it will drop out for a sec there. One of the interesting things when we start up some of these games sometimes, and I'm just going to lower the volume down of the Xbox here, is that when you start off the game first off, if you've played on another console, if you've played on a PC somewhere else, we're not necessarily going to have the latest state of our save progress, all of those things on this particular machine right now. So if I just start the game off here, there we go. We're getting this kind of syncing data for Halo 5 Guardians piece here. And I think that's maybe something you want to expand on there, Lee, this whole idea of like this almost multiplayer gaming experience wherever I want to be, right? When we think of things like xCloud or mobile gaming or whichever scenario, that's a really key part of enabling that.
Yeah, there's a phrase that was used a little while ago, which was appointment game. That was essentially when gaming was on a console that sat underneath the television, and by appointment you had to kind of plan when you were going to use that console, sit down, be there, arrange it, if you were playing with friends or whatever. But you were really tied to the device where it was located. And as gaming has evolved, again, point of mission and expectations, the ability for me to play games and have the same fidelity of experience no matter where I am is becoming an expectation of gamers. Mobile gaming, I found, was maybe the force that led that, but it didn't necessarily lead to the same fidelity of gaming. So one game on a mobile was different how you play on a console. And I think you just touched on the kind of thing like xCloud, the difference that brings about is that I can still enjoy the same gaming experience with the same controls and inputs, so the same level playing field that I'm having with other gamers on my phone by attaching an Xbox controller, and that experience follows me. And it depends how you play gaming. For me, it's a balance. It's killing time sometimes. Other times, it's hey, I'm really into the game I'm playing, and to be able to have access to that, hey, I have a controller in my backpack, or hey, I'm able to log in on your Xbox as an example. Continue my experience is now just fundamental expectation, and it's interesting how that just becomes very status quo very quickly. A lot of games now have that by de facto.
No, absolutely, and I think even when you think of maybe, for some of the listeners might be more enterprise focused given some of the other content that I put out there, but even when you think of scenarios like OneDrive and all of these other scenarios where you're not working from one PC anymore, right? You're setting up your PC on one device, your device breaks, or you need to wipe it and start again for some reason. You go to a new device, sync up OneDrive, and then you're back where you started, you carry on. And it's that same idea, isn't it? Bringing that ability to roam across these different devices here.
Yeah.
So let's jump into Halo. So I guess we've got a few different options. I guess campaign isn't really what we want to focus on here, but we'll look at the multiplayer kind of scenario. So if we just think back to us for a sec, for anyone who listens to episode 1, when I went into Minecraft, the way that I, interacted with Minecraft was I could go and select a number of different servers, or I could make my own custom server, for example. And if I go and jump into multiplayer here, I'm going to go social, back to Lee's point that about, you might want to just casually play, or maybe you're focused on a particular game. As much as I love gaming, I am not a die-hard gamer, I'm not someone who is, let's say you'll see my skills come out very quickly, or lack of them, let's put it that way. But, we'll go in a social arena here, and we'll do quick play. Now, the difference you see here is I, at no point, have actually gone in here and said, right, I want to connect to that server. I want to go and, join these particular players. I'm letting the service, I'm letting the platform actually go and select all of that for me. So it's something that is really transparent to me as a user. And all I care about is that I'm playing a game, the game is there for me, and I enjoy that experience. I don't know, Lee, if there's anything you want to kind of jump in on there at all.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of the beauty of kind of where the technology is hidden. You're not having to orchestrate this experience. It's being conducted to you, and all you're kind of seeing or interfacing with is just the output of the game itself. And all that magic, call it, not magic, it's a lot of server app, but that magic in the background is happening. You're not a participant in making it happen.
No, exactly. And I'm once again going to say how bad I am at multitasking for anyone watching or listening, that I'm going to be rubbish at trying to play Halo whilst walking into walls, apparently. Now, what was interesting, actually, as we were launching this roundup here, was that the matchmaking was pretty quick. There have been times where sometimes I've had to go ahead and... There we go. Died already. There are some times where I've had to go ahead and wait a little while, but actually we were quite lucky there in getting a game going. And I think that's one of the magic pieces behind this kind of service experience, let's say. That there we go. That we... I forgot my trail of thought because I am trying to multitask.
Well, let me add some. You just said something that's really valuable. Right? It's not just multiplayer, and I think that's also the conception. Is I'm just matching 10 people who happen to be online with another 10 people at the same time. That's not actually the case.
Yeah.
A little bit of machine learning can tell that maybe Chris isn't the best player. No disrespect, Chris. And what it'll look for is players of equal caliber, that you have an enjoyable gameplay. No one wants to run into a game who you're matched with people who are just going to bluntly kill you during the game. Yeah. And you're not going to have any gameplay. It's not going to be a great experience for you. You're not going to be a returning customer. You want to match with people who are on the same level as you. Enjoy the experience. And that kind of is going back to what you're saying about how you're looking at your skill level and how you play and matching similar people. Skill level.
No, exactly. And that bought me some time just to turn the volume down, because that's what was distracting me as well. And I think that's a really good point, because, and this comes back to where I was going with the whole matchmaking experience, that it's going to take that into account. And all matchmaking really is looking at a number of variables or a number of factors, right? So, who are the people online and are available? What's your skill level? What are the servers or machines that we have in our kind of fleet of game servers where we host this service? What's the latency like on all of those? And what games are free? What games are in progress? And what type of game do you want to play? And all of that kind of gets mashed up into some kind of algorithm. And then ultimately then a decision gets made. You get allocated to a server and you start playing. Probably, dumbing it down a lot there, but effectively that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it, right? It's just an allocation kind of scheduler there.
It's fun.
And I think that's the where I was going with my earlier points that I plugged. This is really the magic behind a lot of this kind of service idea, that you don't have to worry about those individual servers anymore. You are just experiencing the game, you're coming in, and you don't have to worry about resilience or any of these things of those underlying servers. That's now the platform team, the folks who make Halo, who have to go and worry about that. And for me as a gamer, like we're doing this right now, for me, I had to do barely any prep for this particular podcast. For the last one, had to do a lot more because I had to set up the Minecraft server, etc. This, plug on my Xbox, off I go.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And that's the kind of the bit, right? When you want to play a game, you don't want to be looking like, what's everyone's skill level? Who do I want to match with? Are they cool to match with me? Just let the machinery do all that for you, so to speak. And you go out and you're getting a level of trust that the server is going to do that. But the more you play, the more you learn skill abilities, and all that is an algorithm. It's not just magic. I know I kind of say that naively or in blasé fashion, but it is really kind of matching you. As I said, it's matchmaking. Let's match you with someone who's going to be on the same skill level with you, that you can have an enjoyable gaming experience.
And I think that comes back to what I said earlier, in terms of sometimes it takes quite a while for the games to go ahead and match you with someone. And I think it's that, isn't it? If there is no one there at your skill level, or no servers locally near to you, for example, that actually suit, then it's going to say, actually, we think, based on our historical trends, that actually you might be worth waiting for just an extra minute or two for a better gaming experience. So that's, again, another factor that is kind of taken in that not machine learning, but that matchmaking model. Could argue machine learning there.
Yeah, and going back to what you were saying earlier, it's not limited to gaming. Like any end user of Uber or Lyft can attest. You kind of request a car and it tries to make the best possible experience for you, whether that's the car that's nearby, whether the type of car you requested, whether that's the waiting time, the distance to your destination, who's going to be going in that way anyway if you have a shared ride. So a lot of these things that originated in gaming and probably wasn't directly linked to Uber, but you can see that trend, that expectation of the customer. I want the best experience and I'm willing to wait to get that. In that sense, it's prevalent everywhere.
Yeah. No, I really like the Uber Lyft example, actually, because it is effectively matchmaking, isn't it? It's a different scenario. There we go. As I said, I'm just going to keep apologizing for my poor multitasking here, folks. So let's think about the game itself here now, because I guess one of the comments that we made last time about something like Minecraft is Minecraft's fairly simple as a game, right? You've got players in the world, you've got a number of blocks, and those blocks have different states, for example. And some of that can be pre-generated based on the map that you're on, for example, these kind of things. But something like Halo, there's lots of grenades flying around, there's bullets, there's each player's going to impact each player in terms of health and all these different things. If we think back to what we were talking about earlier with that one blog post, this actors framework piece, that is some of the magic behind what we see here, that rather than representing it in a database or something like that that's going to be really slow, the actors framework at a very, very high level fundamentally is each user, each object is represented inside of a shared cluster, and those users, they have some information associated with them. What weapon are they carrying? How much ammo does it have? What's their HP? All of these kind of things. What's their position on the map? And then it's all of that state kind of communicating with each other that builds up this worldview and kind of impacting then on each other. And I think to something that we talked about slightly last time, maybe not so much in depth, is how latency is such a big factor in a game like this. The longer that me as Red Oboen playing this game right now shoots one of the enemy players, the longer that state is communicated, and maybe there's a third guy playing here as well at the same time, might impact their experience. They might think I'm somewhere on the map, but I'm not actually there anymore because of the latency it took to process that or communicate that change, for example. And again, things like that impact that overall game experience, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the best low latency experience you'll ever have is when you have a conversation between three people in the same room, right? Yeah. Everyone's responding. It's actually happening in real time. And I don't know if anything else is kind of experienced in a corporate environment, the reply all syndrome, where there are large sort of people replying all. Everyone's at the same, things aren't coming through at the right time, flying over the top of somebody else. That's a really cool experience. And you translate that to a game, quite rightly said, if I did something in a game that would affect everybody else's experience, but there was a lag in that happening, even a split second lag, that would make your gameplay experience incorrect or not kind of joined up, if that's the right way of saying it. Again, it becomes a poor experience. It all comes back to experience. No one wants to play a game that's kind of a poor experience. And so latency is one of the top factors of any gaming experience nowadays. Whether you're streaming a game in a campaign with single player, again, if you push an input on your controller, you want that to be represented in real time. You don't want that to be a 3-second delay. Or if you're playing with other people and there's multiple inputs and factors going again. So having that super quick, low latency experience is critical. And gaming more so is an environment where people will be willing to put a significant price in it. I urge you to look on any kind of online retailer website about how much low latency keyboards cost. And I mean, I've never noticed a delay between hitting a key on my keyboard and it appearing in like Outlook.com. But people will pay a significant price to have a keyboard that has even low latency. So the interaction between the gameplay and what they're playing is super fine. So you can see there's a lot of importance there.
I just can't believe you haven't played a game of Outlook.com, seeing how quickly you can type it and put it into the address bar, you know.
8 hours of gameplay a day. It takes a while to master, but it is fundamentally true. You can't put a price on latency because it undermines the entire experience of why you're playing that game to start with.
Absolutely. And I couldn't put it any better myself. I'm not going to add anything on top of that. I think you nailed that one. I'm going to pause from actually playing anymore for a minute because, as you've seen, my multitasking skills are not the finest, especially in a game like Halo where it's so intense that you need to go and really focus on it. So let's maybe talk a little bit then and shift gears a little bit here. Let's talk about thinking about Halo 5, right? Halo 5 has been out for quite some time now, quite a few years. And it's not like as a game that it's static. You know, it's not like there's not any new content released or patches or bug fixes or anything like that. So some of these similar principles around things like DevOps, for example, that we take from the enterprise world, where we think about the value or rather the point of DevOps is the delivery of value to our end users. So maybe let's talk a little bit about that, because I guess there's something really important now that we're managing this game as a service, because as an individual server previously, we know that if we need to do any maintenance for that game or any maintenance for that server, we had to bring it down. That affects the gameplay. Whereas we need to be a bit more thoughtful, I guess, when we're in this kind of service world about how we approach that.
Yeah, I mean, that's on kind of what you said there earlier, right? I'd say games as a service, but actually software as a service, let's call it that, is becoming more and more prevalent. I mean, Windows 10. I mean, there's a perfect example of a service that now has incremental update that keeps that service alive. And like you say, Halo, I mean, Grand Theft Auto is the prime example. When Grand Theft Auto last release, I mean, this has just been a constant iteration of their cloud service and constant updates and improvements to the game. And it still has a huge, engagement. And I think there's a couple of factors at play here, right? One is that is a huge uptake to do to release incremental updates to a game and patches that you don't fundamentally change the core proposition of what that game is. That has a community and interaction of followers around it, but yet you're able to augment it or add to it enough that keeps it vibrant and fresh and bringing people back. LiveOps, DevOps, all those kind of things, it's prevalent everywhere. It's not just gaming, but it allows you to, as you say, keep the game uptime regular, to make updates, to introduce new content without it being a new iteration, without a barrier to entry of purchasing a new game. Yes, there may be some parts where there's an incremental cost for that add-on, but that's less of a barrier than buying a full game where all these updates have been done before and iterations. And so as a psyche, like I said, with Windows 10 and various other elements as well, people have become accustomed to incremental updates as opposed to, version X, version Y, version Z. And it's easy to take for granted how challenging it is to do updates. I won't name certain games for certain reasons, but there are some games out there that on release are completely different gameplay experiences to where they are today, even though it's the same game. And that is wholly in part to the incremental updates and LiveOps, if you want to call it that are issued as a matter of fact. And it's not just kind of being able to push an update. It's being able to get live analytics data to inform the update that you process to see in real time the difficulties players are facing and to, in that minute, devise a plan to address it. Versus 3 months later, doing a big data dump, working with what players are playing, finding that level of dissatisfaction, building that into the game that will in another 9 months. Compare that to, I can see what our players are doing in real time, and in a week, I'm going to release a patch that fixes that. It's totally different experience for your players.
No, absolutely. And there's so much in there that you said I want to explore, but I'm going to go with my first thought here, and then we'll go back to kind of the monitoring piece, because I think that's a super interesting topic in its own right. But thinking about a game like Halo, for example, compared with, I think next time we might talk Sea of Thieves, maybe. I think that's a nice, continuation of what we're talking about. So let's compare it to Sea of Thieves. I think the difference between doing something like a LiveOps or a DevOps for something like Halo versus Sea of Thieves is going to be quite different. So, for example, with Halo, the way you might want to approach a rollout, and again, I have no knowledge of any of the internals or the back end or how it's working. I'm just kind of speculating and hypothesizing, knowing what I know from a DevOps perspective. The way I would probably schedule updates to the fleet is that I would roll updates on the underlying hosts which have the least amount of games scheduled on them. And if there are any games scheduled, I'd wait until they're completed, make sure no more games get scheduled on that host, run the update, and then carry on progressing through the fleet in that way. So that would be very different to, say, a Sea of Thieves, for example, because, with Halo, it's all round based, it's quite time based. So a game's going to last for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. With Sea of Thieves, it's this open world, right? And I guess until all players leave that world, potentially, that particular instance of that game is not necessarily gone. So there's maybe some challenges, I think, for anyone considering doing any game development, that they need to think about the nuances of the style of their game as well, and how the operations would be different, I think.
Yeah, and you see something there which is really interesting, right? I mean, like, there's many updates you can get, like my phone updates, my PC updates, my games updates. The things that you have to do in gaming is, like, before you play a game like Sea of Thieves, is, hey, before you can play, you have to complete this update, so that everyone who's engaging in that experience is on the same level playing field.
Yep.
I know my phone will update, and I know some maybe not updated their phone from 6 versions ago, I think, and so forth. But I'm same for my laptop. But I think with the gaming experience, when it's a shared experience, that's the most important bit. You all have to be kind of on the same level playing field. And as you say, it varies by game. And there's no miracle. There may be a future where a game can update in real time. You don't even know about it when the next round kicks in. It plays that way. But it is definitely nuanced by the type of game you have to play and the level of fairness. It's a game. You can't have like a football team where one team has had like physio and whatever, the other team hasn't yet and stretched. And you can't have a fair game there. You need a level playing field in some cases, and that does dictate how you roll updates.
Which again might also impact the whole matchmaking scenario. And I guess one of the areas I'm kind of thinking about, I don't know if this one holds as true, is something like Among Us. They've got like their main application stream, and they've got a beta application stream. And I think it was around Christmas time, there were some new features that they hadn't quite released. In fact, yeah, this does hold true. There were some new features they hadn't released in the beta stream to the mainstream users. So I think it was like anonymous voting. There were other different things in there as well. But obviously, if you had some people able to see who could see the votes, some people who couldn't see the votes just because of the type of game that they've got, that's going to impact the people's gaming experiences again.
Yeah, completely.
So let's jump back to what you said there about the monitoring side of things as well, because that's a huge part about DevOps in general. It's people always talk about the people, process, technology to deliver value to end users, but how do you know whether your users are actually happy or not about what they're getting? Right? How do you know if they're satisfied? How do you know if they're having a good experience, a poor experience? And I think being able to integrate that telemetry directly into the game, and being able to understand, we've had this many shots fired in a round, more people using this weapon, there are more kills using this weapon, or in this part of the map, people are dying more, or something like that. what are maybe some of the things that you see in that space? Because it's quite I think in the cloud world where I come from an enterprise world, a lot of people are still kind of getting their heads around how to do monitoring in the cloud, I would say. Distributed monitoring and all these things, quite complicated. What would you say maybe some of the trends you're seeing in this monitoring space from a gaming perspective?
Yeah, first of all, you have to say that we live in a world nowadays where we're constantly, my use of my laptop, my use of my phone is mine. And whether I share those analytics or not, that information, whether it's anonymous or, attached to me, is going back to some sort of dashboard that is representing a trend. There's two aspects of advance what you said. There's one piece which is, as someone who understands the game can look at the data and interpret certain metrics or trends that infers a behavior. For example, a certain level isn't having as much gameplay as you'd expect. You built the game, you'd expect that level is cutting short. There's going to be a problem there. And you can start going back to maybe some of the footage of what people are playing and seeing where it's falling off. It could be a bug, it could work quite well through testing. And the other piece is that kind of machine learning. You work with a machine to develop an understanding of what should happen, and they start to flag flags or give you notifications of something working right or that it has determined isn't correct. So whilst there's no kind of perfect way of doing it, it is a balance. I think it's going to be interesting to watch the space of machine learning, determining those scenarios and flagging to developers. But I think on the whole, if you've built a game and you have an expectation of how you should play, and the data system else, you're very open and you're very aware that this should address there or look into. And similarly, you can find things. You only have to look over these dashboards. With data interested, you can go into so much. But I think the key point is that the fidelity of data that we're now able to capture, length of gaming sessions, who you're playing against, how often you're playing. If you're not coming back, that's a sign. And if somebody's not coming back to a game, that's obviously a problem. It's not going right there. And that's another trend you can look into. So many different points. I think the main bit is having the data in real time. So there's no lag, you can see it, you can address it. And equally, having a high level of fidelity that you can start to build trends from. It's not summarized. You can go in and really get into the nitty gritty of it.
And maybe let's kind of change the discussion a bit here. How much of it would you say is the responsibility of, say, the actual game developer themselves versus, let's say, a platform like Xbox Live, right? Because I guess there's some aspects of what we've talked about here that you might be able to get if you're leveraging a service like Xbox Live. There might be some insights, telemetry, whatnot that you can get. So I guess my assumption would be how deeply you care about some of that telemetry and insights might be a factor. What would you say? What are some of the things you see in that area?
Not true. This is very subjective, but if you are developing a game, that game is your offering, you are fully responsible for that experience. Whether that's whoever you leverage to be, a service provider or whatnot, it's your responsibility. And it's your job to look into the data and identify where sources of issues may arise or maybe even opportunities to improve. And so that's typically my point of view. If I had a game and I'd employed a certain third-party service to provide an experience, that's my decision to do that. Therefore, it's my decision to audit and manage that solution I've incorporated into my game. And yeah, I think that's ultimately where the responsibility lies. It's also where you have access to the data. And data isn't shared very freely nowadays. Very stringent privacy rules. And so often, in many cases, that data is only accessible to the game developer or the publisher. So only they can take an action to respond and to rectify certain challenges.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's a good point. And I guess, with areas like Europe having GDPR, and I think California has its own privacy act as well, that is such a prevalent point, isn't it? And I think, again, we see it a lot in the enterprise, but actually, is it any different in gaming? No. Why should it be?
Yeah, totally.
Still people's data. So, gotcha. So what if I were starting to build a game like Halo, for example? Let's just say, sticking with the LiveOps and the monitoring side of things, because I think it's an interesting topic, and maybe matchmaking as well. Hey, that went really well, didn't it? Just falling off a cliff, jumping and dying. what would maybe be some of the things that, there's certain technologies or certain areas that I could start looking at, for example? Like, I know Microsoft has, PlayFab, for example. Does that help with some of these aspects?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm not going to make this an advertorial.
No, sure.
Work for the team that sells this, but I'll just put it this way. Ultimately, it depends on what you're developing. I know that's a very ambiguous, vague way of answering it, but for example, PlayFab is a managed. You don't have the talent, the expertise, or maybe the bandwidth to build some of these solutions that you could build fully customized on, say, infrastructure like Azure. And PlayFab is a perfect way to get off the ground. There's LiveOps included, there's multiplayer servers, there's leaderboards. You don't have to worry about building them, ensuring that you understand how to do it, just buy it.
Yeah.
You don't have customization, but you have a solution that works. So I think if you're saying starting off and you're referring that maybe you don't have that experience yet, then I think a managed solution is perfect, and it allows you to build up the degree of technology in your game and service level that you can maybe in the future expand on that with a more customizable solution. And there's also a number of third-party partners who build incredible solutions. I think I mentioned this last time when we talked, like Hadian, who have just some of the most incredible technology that we actually integrate into Minecraft and actually expand beyond just gaming. Again, another point we made earlier, that they've been able to leverage that technology in healthcare. So again, short answer to your question, there's a lot of solutions out there that are built on say an Azure or other cloud providers, and there's also a series of directly sold managed solutions. I think the main thing is just kind of understanding your goal and then working out which of these solutions best meets your needs, your budget, your degree of input that you want. But the days have gone when you had to read an encyclopedia of how to do something. The service, you buy service already existing for that, and there's some really competitive pricing out there. You'd be shocked when you kind of see how actually affordable it is to integrate that.
No, gotcha, and that's a really good answer. Actually, I like how you approached it, because it actually echoes something that we're talking about in some of the other series that I'm working on at the moment, and really a big focus on requirements, right? Because I think what you also need to bear in mind is sometimes, I think a lot of people all think of games as having tons and tons of developers behind them, and lots of people who can go ahead and focus on all of these efforts. But actually, like any kind of project or solution, there's limited resources, there's limited time, there's limited budget, and you've got to be realistic on kind of the areas that you're going to focus on and the things that you're going to work on. And it might be that actually for certain aspects of the game that you're making, you want to go ahead and build your own solution. Some of it you might go and use a managed platform, and that's absolutely fine. I think ultimately what it comes back to is those requirements, isn't it? About where are the areas you want to focus on. And it doesn't have to be like a forever decision either. It's not like you take a dependency on one particular technology and you can't, integrate and focus on that in a later iteration because you see the value there now. I think it's important to call out.
Yeah, and kind of something again. I mean, we work at Microsoft. We are blessed to have a lot of research available. I think a huge proportion of game developers have less than 2 years experience in the game development.
Wow.
A lot of developers as well are hobbyists. For example, they develop games to learn and grow their skills. That's their primary goal. But there's also some game developers who develop it as a business. A business needs to be monetized. And going back to that conversation we were just having, if I was doing this through the lens of, hey, I need to run a business, my game is a business to me.
Yes.
Is it more cost effective to employ a managed service or hire a talented game developer who has, just being transparent, a salary and benefits? And that's the kind of which comes back to the decision of what path you take depends on, am I doing this to learn and finesse my skills? Am I doing this for a business? Other scenarios and so forth. And there's a solution that will support all of those.
No, absolutely. You got me thinking, actually. I registered a domain name over the weekend for a potential game idea that I have. And I'll have to talk with you about it at some point. Can't give any secrets away on it. But yeah, I was having some ideas with talking with my girlfriend about some hobbies she has and maybe gamifying those. So everyone can do it. If I've got ideas, anyone listening here can do it as well. So I'm going to stop the gaming there because I'm not going to be able to carry on concentrating. But I guess we're about 40 minutes in here. Is there anything, when we think about Halo? Because I guess next time we're going to talk about Sea of Thieves, and I think what we can talk about there is kind of the inventory, the state of that, and thinking about the world again and those kind of things. But with what we've seen with Halo, what we've talked about with matchmaking and LiveOps, DevOps, those monitoring pieces, is there anything else you kind of wanted to interject with, add in at all? Any thoughts there, Lee?
Yeah, there's something I would want to kind of call out, and I think it's important, often gets overlooked, is games like Halo are part of a community. And there's other games that fall into this bracket as well, but it's part of a community. And it has a following. People, there's other games like Gears of War. People have tattoos of Gears, of war emblems on their body. It is a following. People are invested in the IP, and that's the key bit. People are invested in the IP. And so if somebody is willing to invest themselves into a product that you've created, you have an enormous responsibility to live up to the expectations and deliver a quality gaming experience for that person because they've invested time and energy. And so ensuring that you have a bit, DevOps isn't like a nice to have when you have a following like that. You have a huge customer base that you have to satisfy. Ensuring that you are listening to them, have a means to analyze the behavior of how they're playing and address concerns, and also ensure that the game is constantly fresh and up to date. It is not just kind of a nice to have nowadays. You owe it to a community of people, and we're talking like millions of people who are invested in this game, and you can't invest more time. And so I think when you are starting to develop a game, you should consider the community that you will build around your game and the responsibility you have as a developer to not manage that community, but to support and address that community because they have invested their time in what you've built. So always have that top of mind when you start building a game, and ensure that you are thinking through all the means you can to support that.
Excellent. I think that's a really nice way to wrap things up. I've got nothing else to top off that one. So Lee, big thank you for joining here today. And I guess until next month, we'll be doing another one then. But thanks for joining. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
So, folks, we've talked there all about Halo. And obviously, you've seen some of my gaming going on in the background there as well. And my poor multitasking skills. But what we've talked about there is matchmaking and how that's an enabler for making cloud games become a service potentially. We've talked about the importance of LiveOps or DevOps and this idea of you're no longer making this game that you ship every however many months. You're continually enhancing, continually upgrading and releasing new aspects to that game as well. So that DevOps piece really comes into play. And I think Lee put it very nicely that the users that are using your game, they are a community, right? And we've talked about this from a DevOps perspective before. It's all about delivering value to your end users. So going in with that mindset is going to be really critical to building a successful game. So there we go. Next time, what we'll be talking about is Sea of Thieves. So we'll be sailing the seas as we go and talk about some of these cloud concepts. We'll be talking about things like inventory as well in that one. And if there's anything you want us to focus in on in any of these episodes, do let us know. Get in touch either on the YouTube videos, drop a comment, let us know, or go ahead and tweet us on Twitter as well, and we'll put those links, etc., in the show notes of this particular video. So with that, all there is to say is thank you very much for listening with us and watching or listening to the session here today. Tune in next month, and bye for now.